Okay, tonight is the 25th of July, and this is the 10th night we are speaking on the Digha Nikaya Suttas. Tonight we come to an important sutta on dependent origination called the Mahanidana Sutta, Sutta number 15, Mahanidana Sutta. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was staying among the Kurus. There is a market town there called Kammasadhamma, and the Venerable Ananda came to the Lord, saluted him, sat down to one side and said, "It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous how profound this dependent origination is, and how profound it appears, and yet it appears to me as clear as clear." And the Buddha said, "Do not say that, Ananda, do not say that. This dependent origination is profound and appears profound. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this Dhamma, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string, covered as with a blight, tangled like coarse grass, unable to pass beyond states of woe, the ill destiny, ruin, and the round of births and deaths." Stop here for a moment. So here, Venerable Ananda at that time was supposed to be a Sotapanna, and he says dependent origination is supposed to be profound, and yet it appears to him as clear as daylight. But the Buddha said, "Don't say that." The Buddha said, "Origination is profound and appears profound." Why does the Buddha say it is profound? Actually, in the suttas we find that even before enlightenment, the Buddha said he considered what is the cause of suffering. What is the cause of suffering means basically what's the cause of being born, aging, sickening and dying. And when he considered like that, then he worked backwards. Then he realized the cause was being born, because it's the nature of the world. Once you are born into the world is a world of impermanence. Everything must change. So you will grow old and become sick and die. Similarly, he asked, what is the cause of birth? So he retraced the steps and he understood basically dependent origination like what Venerable Ananda understands. But to really understand dependent origination, we find in the Vinaya books, after the Buddha was enlightened, he spent the whole night contemplating dependent origination, how dependent origination arises and how it ceases, and how it arises and ceases. So he spent 12 hours the whole night, from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m., contemplating dependent origination. And during that time, he used his psychic powers probably to look at how beings arise and all these things. So having contemplated for 12 hours, then he understood that dependent origination is profound. But even if you have a basic understanding of dependent origination, like Venerable Ananda, you can be a Sotapanna, an Arya. And the Buddha continued, "If Ananda, you are asked, has aging and death a condition for its existence? You should answer yes. If asked, what conditions aging and death? You should answer, aging and death is conditioned by birth. What conditions birth? Being or becoming or existence conditions birth. Clinging conditions being. Craving conditions clinging or attachment. Feeling conditions craving. Contact conditions feeling. Mentality and materiality, nama rupa, conditions contact. Consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. If asked, has consciousness a condition for its existence? You should answer yes. If asked, what conditions consciousness? You should answer Mentality and materiality conditions consciousness. Thus, Ananda, mentality and materiality conditions consciousness, and consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. Mentality and materiality conditions contact. Contact conditions feeling. Feeling conditions craving. Craving conditions clinging or attachment. Clinging conditions being or existence or becoming. Being conditions birth. Birth conditions aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and distress. Thus this whole mass of suffering comes into existence. Stop here for a moment. So here you see the Buddha talks about 10 links of dependent origination of suffering. Normally you find in other suttas the Buddha talks about 12 links. But here you find the Buddha talks about 10. The two links that are left out here is sankhara, volition, and avijja, ignorance. So you have 10 here. Normally we chant on dependent origination. Avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññānaṁ, viññāna paccaya nammarūpaṁ, nammarūpa paccaya salayatanaṁ, salayatana paccaya paso, etc. So here looks as there's only 9, not 10. Even the salayatana, the 6 sense bases, are not here. So it looks like you can consider this dependent origination of suffering by these 9 links instead of 12. Further on. Okay, we continue and see. I have said birth, conditions, aging and death, and this is the way that should be understood. If Ananda, there were no birth at all, anywhere, of anybody or anything, of devas to the deva state, of gandhabas, of yakhas, of ghosts, of humans, of quadrupeds, of birds, of reptiles to the reptile state, if there were absolutely no birth at all of all these beings, then with the absence of all birth, the cessation of birth, could aging and death appear? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for aging and death, namely birth. I have said, being conditions birth. If there were absolutely no being or existence in the world of sense desires, of form, or the formless world, could birth appear? No, Lord. Therefore, just this is the condition of birth, namely being. Clinging conditions being. If there were absolutely no clinging, sensuous clinging, clinging to views, to rules and rituals, to identity view, could being appear? Craving conditions clinging. If there were absolutely no craving for sight, sound, smells, taste, tangibles, mind, objects, could clinging appear? Feeling conditions craving. If there were absolutely no feeling born of eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact, in the absence of all feeling, with the cessation of feeling, could craving appear? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for craving, namely feeling. And so, Ananda, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions seeking, seeking conditions acquisition, acquisition conditions decision making, decision making conditions lustful desire, lustful desire conditions attachment, attachment conditions appropriation, appropriation conditions avarice, avarice conditions guarding of possessions. And because of the guarding of possessions, there arise the taking up of stick and sword, quarrels, disputes, arguments, strife, abuse, lying, and other unskilled states. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha makes us understand how by logical thinking he could untangle these conditions of dependent origination of suffering. And then, so at the bottom the Buddha says, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions seeking, seeking is pariyesana, and seeking conditions acquisition, labha, acquisition conditions decision making, vinichaya, decision making conditions lustful desire, chandaraga, lustful desire conditions attachment, ajosana, attachment conditions appropriation, parigaha, appropriation conditions avarice, macharya, avarice conditions guarding of possessions, arakha. So because of that, to protect your possessions, then you take up the stick and sword, and quarrels and disputes, arguments, strife, abuse, lying, and other unskillful states arise. I have said, all these evil, unskilled states arise because of the guarding of possessions. For if there were absolutely no guarding of possessions, would there be the taking up of stick or sword, quarrels, disputes, etc.? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, the guarding of possessions is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all these evil, unskilled states. I have said, avarice conditions the guarding of possessions, etc. Appropriation conditions avarice, attachment conditions appropriation, lustful desire conditions attachment, decision-making conditions lustful desire, acquisition conditions decision-making, seeking conditions acquisition. I have said, craving conditions seeking. If there were no craving, would there be any seeking? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, craving is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all seeking. Thus these two things become united in one by feeling. Stop here for a moment. How do these two things become united in one by feeling? Because of feeling, craving arises. And because of craving, why craving arises? Because of pleasant feeling. Feeling here refers to pleasant feeling. When you have unpleasant feeling, then you feel repulse, aversion. But when you have pleasant feeling, whether because of sights or sounds or smells or taste or touch or thoughts, then there is a tendency to crave for it, to want it again and again. And that condition seeking, etc. I have said, contact conditions feeling. Therefore, contact is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for feeling. Mentality and materiality conditions contact. But whatever properties, features, signs or indications the mind factor is conceived of, this is mind factor is Namakaya or mentality body, you can see. The mentality body is conceived of. Would there, in the absence of such properties, features, signs or indications pertaining to the mentality body, would there manifest any grasping at the idea of the materiality body? No, Lord. Or in the absence of any such properties, features, signs or indications pertaining to the materiality body, would there be any grasping at sensory reaction on the part of the mentality body? No, Lord. Stop here for a moment. Property the mind had is conceived of. So here is saying whether it is the mentality body, that means a mental factor, something occurring in the mind, or the materiality body outside. Outside means materiality body can refer to form, can refer to sounds. Sounds also is part of the materiality, and smells, taste, and touch. So these five senses refers to the rupa kaya. So whether it's because of pleasant forms or sound, sight, smell, taste, touch, and the mental part, anything in the thoughts, then would there be any grasping? Then because a sensory reaction here occurs when a sense object impinges on the sense base, meaning form or sound or sights or smells, taste, touch, impinges on the sense base, the eye, ear, nose, etc. So, by whatever properties the materiality body and the mentality body are designated, in their absence, is there manifested any grasping at the idea or at sensory reaction? No, Lord. By whatever properties, features, signs or indications the mentality body is conceived of, in the absence of these, is there any contact to be found? No, Lord. Then Ananda, just this, namely mentality and materiality, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all contact. I have said consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. If consciousness were not to come into the mother's womb, would mentality and materiality develop there? No, Lord. Or if consciousness having entered the mother's womb were to be deflected, would mentality and materiality come to birth in this life? No, Lord. And if the consciousness of such a tender young being, boy or girl, were thus cut off, would mentality and materiality grow, develop and mature? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely consciousness, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of mentality and materiality. Stop here for a moment. For a fetus in the mother's womb to grow, consciousness must come into it. In other words, the being to be born goes into the womb, and the egg, this consciousness develops in that egg, that fetus, and then from there the mentality and materiality of that fetus will grow. So the other thing you must bear in mind is mentality and materiality and consciousness are counterpart. They always come together and they cease together. When there is consciousness, mentality and materiality must be present. And when there's no consciousness, there's no mentality and materiality. Mentality and materiality are the objects of consciousness, so must always come together with consciousness. I have said mentality and materiality conditions consciousness. If consciousness did not find a resting place in mentality and materiality, would there subsequently be an arising and coming to be of birth, aging, death and suffering? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely mentality and materiality, is the root, the cause, the condition of consciousness. Thus far then, Ananda, we can trace birth and decay, death and falling into other states and being reborn. Thus far extends the way of designation of concepts. Thus far is the sphere of understanding. Thus far the round goes as far as can be discerned in this life, namely to mentality and materiality together with consciousness. In what ways, Ananda, do people explain the nature of the self? Some declare the self to be material and limited, saying, myself is material and limited. Some declare it to be material and unlimited. Some declare it to be immaterial and limited. Some declare it to be immaterial and unlimited, saying, myself is immaterial and unlimited. Whoever declares the self to be material and limited considers it to be so either now or in the next world, thinking, though it is not so now, I shall acquire it there. That being so, that is all we need say about the view that the self is material and limited, And the same applies to the other theories. So much Ananda for those who proffer an explanation of the self. How is it with those who do not explain the nature of the self, etc., etc., as in verses 23 and 24, but negated? In what ways, Ananda, do people regard the self? They equate the self with feeling. Feeling is myself, or feeling is not myself. Myself is impercipient. Feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient. It is of a nature to feel. Now, Ananda, one who says feeling is myself should be told, there are three kinds of feeling, friend: pleasant, painful, and neutral. Which of the three do you consider to be yourself? When the pleasant feeling is felt, no painful or neutral feeling is felt, but only pleasant feeling. When a painful feeling is felt, no pleasant or neutral feeling is felt, but only painful feeling. And when a neutral feeling is felt, no pleasant or painful feeling is felt, only neutral feeling. Pleasant feeling is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, bound to decay, to vanish, to fade away, to cease. So too are painful feeling and neutral feeling. So anyone who on experiencing a pleasant feeling thinks, this is myself, must at the cessation of that pleasant feeling think, myself has gone. And the same with painful and neutral feelings. Thus whoever thinks, feeling is myself, is contemplating something in this present life that is impermanent, a mixture of happiness and unhappiness, subject to arising and passing away. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain feeling is myself. Stop here for a moment. This self, atta, refers to something that is there all the time. If it appears and disappears, it cannot be the self. The concept of the self, or the Indian concept of the self, is something that is permanent and which you can identify as myself, and it's always there. If you say feeling is yourself, one moment feeling is there, another moment feeling is not there. Then when feeling has disappeared, then where is yourself? You must remember this is the concept of the self. So when the Buddha talks about anatta, no self, and talks about emptiness, sunyata, it does not mean that there is nothing. What it means is that there is nothing permanent. If there's something permanent, then you can identify that with yourself. But because there is nothing in the world that is permanent, so there's nothing in the world that is self. But anyone who says, feeling is not myself, myself is impercipient, should be asked, if, friend, no feelings at all were to be experienced, would there be the thought, I am? To which he would have to reply, no, Lord. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain, feeling is not myself, myself is impercipient. Or anyone who says, feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient, myself is of a nature to feel, should be asked, well, friend, if all feelings absolutely and totally ceased, could there be the thought, I am this, as I am this feeling? To which he would have to reply, no, Lord. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain, feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient, myself is of a nature to feel. From the time, Ananda, when the monk no longer regards feeling as the self, or the self as being impercipient, or as being percipient and of a nature to feel, by not so regarding, he clings to nothing in the world. Not clinging, he is not excited by anything, and not being excited, he gains personal liberation, and he knows birth is finished, the holy life has been led. Done was what had to be done, there is nothing more here. So stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that some people say they have feeling, but if they have feeling, then when the feeling has disappeared, then where is the self gone? Or if he says there is no feeling, so the Buddha says, if you say there is no feeling, how come you have a self? So if he understands that feeling is not the self, but the self has a nature to feel, but that is by not regarding the feeling to be the self, then he does not cling to feeling. Feeling is the cause of clinging, because when pleasant feelings arise, it's only because we identify ourselves with feelings that we attach to feelings. So when pleasant feeling arises, we tend to crave for it and want it again and again. And craving gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to being. But if we recognize that feeling is not the self, or belonging to the self, that feeling is impermanent, and whatever feelings arise, we don't attach to it. And if we don't attach to feelings, then there's nothing in the world we attach to, because all the things in the world that we attach to is basically because it gives us pleasant feeling. So when you are not attached to anything, then you are not excited by anything. Then only the mind is equanimous, then you can attain liberation. And if anyone were to say to a monk whose mind was thus freed that Tathagata exists after death, that would be seen by him as a wrong opinion and unfitting. Likewise, the Tathagata does not exist. Both exist and does not exist. Neither exists nor does not exist after death. Why so? As far, Ananda, as designation and the range of designation reaches, as far as language and the range of language reaches, as far as concepts and the range of concepts reaches, as far as understanding and the range of understanding reaches, as far as the cycle reaches and revolves, that monk is liberated from all that by the higher knowledges, super knowledge is abhinya. And to maintain that such a liberated monk does not know and see would be a wrong view and incorrect. So as we mentioned before, when a monk knows and sees, then he does not have opinions, because he knows